All right, welcome back to the garage. Today we are showing off the Rivetfolk, which is the second Better Bot project, free to print faction. You might put it on some card to make it a little bit sturdier. And if you were watching last time, you will see the logical lizards are now on a color player board, which is nice. Again, the only real difference is the colored suit icons over here. But again, the shapes are different enough that the colors really aren't necessary. And the same thing goes for the Rivetfolk. Grayscale works perfectly fine if you don't have or want to spend the money on color printing. You're good. So, overview, just like with the logical lizards and the next teaching video of the cyber corvids, there is not an overview like out of ROOTbotics, like the other factions have. So just like the logical lizards, it says status, new version that should play much better. However, it is not balanced yet or extensively play tested. So the same disclaimer as before applies to the Rivetfolk. Now, before I go any further, this is going to be our next playthrough. So it's going to be another Robo Rumble. So we have the tried and true mechanical marquees, trying to get something close to a W for them. The Vagabot is coming back. I'm going to try the Tinker this time, which is the normal difficulty. Logical lizards, giving them another go, and Rivetfolk. So it's going to be all robots, and I'm just going to be piloting them for the game. So just like I showed in the little pre-video time when I showed off printing off all this component in color, this is the enormous, ridiculous card. Now compare this. This is the older, I think back before they were called the Otter Overlords, now known as the Rivetfolk. So if I was actually to adjust the size properly, this would have been this size. This is enormous because it comes on its own page. So just make sure you size it down. It is actually kind of nice because I can prop this up back here on the wall and it's very readable. This is just explaining that you're not able to change the order of the market. Your hand is the market. They're added to the right side. We'll talk about that. But also the cards for how the other bots are going to purchase. And also those are going to be used no matter if the Rivetfolk or a human is playing the regular Riverfolk. So that one is just kind of a reminder. This actually is going to be useful during the game. We'll cover all this stuff in a little bit. So I'm just going to prop it up against the wall, this enormous card. This one's old, so I'm going to get rid of it. So you'll see that we set up the board already. Marquee, go down first. I rolled, and they're down here in this rabbit clearing. The Vagabot goes next. So they're set up. They have their ruins in place. Again, the river does not separate these two forest areas. This is one forest zone. So on the autumn map, this is the only spot the Vagabot is going to start because it goes to the place adjacent to the most clearings, and this is the only place in the board that has 5. That was a mistake from last time, those of you remember. I'm still going to use the same meeple because it actually kind of looks somewhat like the Tinker, but also it can just, again, stare creepily up at you, so we don't lose track of the Vagabot in the video playback. Logical lizards will start opposite the Marquee or the Eerie if one of those are in the game. Like last time, if both of them are in the game, then the lizards choose a random other clearing. So they are over there, nice kind of protected spot, because remember, this is the one clearing the Marquee does not put a cat in, so the lizards just get to hang out there. Then they start on the Sanctify space over here. Again, a little bit nicer pop of color. And that brings us to the Rivetfolk. So we are going to dump out our things, and we're going to place a warrior into each river clearing. So those are all our warriors. We'll put the rest down here. Okay, victory point. Stock the market. We will get to that in a second. We won't do that just yet. Not listed in the setup instructions on the BetterBot page are a couple of things. It's not a published thing yet. There is not the official Law of Root style faction setup guideline. It's just a really kind of basic overview. So some of these things I think they assume you're just going to do because it's close enough to the human operated Riverfolk. So one thing is, all you need are one of these glass beads. So these are the beads that kind of highlight the prices that you sell your goods and services for as a human player. But we'll talk about that later. You do not do that with the Rivetfolk, and we'll explain why. You just need one for the investments and starts on 0. The other thing is all of your little trade posts. You can fill up the trade post area with those. And then you're going to put out the trading cards for any Clockwork or BetterBot project faction that is playing. This is, again, is not in the rules list on the page, but it is on that big giant card. So I have the 3 of them here. The rest of them will not be used. And so these explain what each faction is going to prioritize in terms of what things are going to purchase from the Rivetfolk. So it's a different order. There are different stipulations for each of them. So just quickly to run through what these ones will be looking at. Mechanical Marquee. First, hand card. So buying a card, buying riverboat access, and mercenaries. So hand card. If the leftmost card in the market shows a craftable item or is a bird card, buy it and use it as the order card. If not, move it to the rightmost card. So it's if then, it's either going to prioritize escalated daylight or crafting for a victory point. And if nothing else, just kind of shuffle the market a little bit to make sure things move around. Riverboats. Treat rivers as pass between clearings. If at least one move uses a river, buy the riverboat service. So this is going to ask a little bit more out of you as the pilot, because you're going to be have to be looking at these options for moving and for using the mercenaries and deciding whether or not they would be applicable. It's not quite as cut and dry as some of the other factions. And then finally, mercenaries. If you battle in any clearing with 2 or less of your warriors, but Rivetfolk are present, buy mercenaries. So makes sense, bulk up your numbers. Vagabot. And this one is interesting. We'll talk more about how Vagabot purchases, because usually people purchase with warriors. We'll do that later, but it prioritizes hand card, then riverboats, and it will never buy mercenaries. Hand card. If the leftmost card in the market shows a craftable item, buy it and use it as the order card. If it doesn't, move it to the rightmost card. Exhaust 1 item to do so. There we go. We're already talking about it. So again, there are no warriors for the Vagabot to pay with. So the payments box will never be populated by anything, but it will take exhausting an item to use this. So pretty much the same thing as Marquee, except it doesn't have the added stipulation of buying a bird card. It's just if it's craftable. Next, riverboats. It's the same as Marquee. If they're, essentially you just use rivers as when you're deciding these moves over here. If using a river would make it faster, then you are going to use them. It says do not exhaust an item. If at least one move uses a river, buy the riverboat service. Do not exhaust an item. And then he will never do mercenaries. Finally, logical lizards. Hand card. Won't ever do riverboats, mercenaries. Hand card. If the leftmost card in the market shows a craftable item, buy it and place it on top of the lost souls. Do the same if you have less than level, in brackets, cards in the lost souls. If not, move to the rightmost card. So again, they're all looking to pick up those extra victory points for craftable items. In this case, goes to the lost souls instead of using it as their order card. But it also, the added stipulation of knowing what your level is, 3, 4, or 5 cards from lost souls are what you're going to go through during the daytime, what are these called? Oh, I'm not sure. Is my hat really noticeable? All right, good. It's not. So in daylight, you're going to perform rituals. The number is based on the difficulty level. So either 3, 4, or 5. So this is saying, you know, if you don't have enough to do your full amount of rituals, then you're going to go up to the, you know, until you either have enough to do your daily rituals or you don't have any more warriors to spend. So that's going to be a major change for the early game, because last time we used them, there were some times when it was pretty close. Won't do riverboats because they really don't move. And then mercenaries. If buy mercenaries allow you to place a garden that you wouldn't place otherwise, buy mercenaries. So daylight, which is, you know, if I just place this guy down here with a ritual, obviously I would not have rule here, so I couldn't put a garden down. But if this little otter is here, then, and I have a guy to pay, and I pay for that, I suddenly rule this for the turn, and then you get to place down the garden. So having the Rivetfolk in the game is going to both make sure that the lizards are almost always able to do their maximum number of rituals. It's also going to make it a lot more likely that they can place gardens down more often than not when they are doing those rituals. So it's going to cause a lot of clogging up of these locations on the map. So again, we'll explain when and these happen, but you have to pull out those ones for each of the factions. Let's put these here for now, so I'm not really using them. Next up, choose a difficulty level. Same thing as with logical lizards, and you'll see with the cyber corvids, it is not a different card, it is a number, 1, 2, or 3. So because the first time, we're just going to say 1, we're going to put it on beginner, and then that is good. Boss mode, also just like logical lizards, if you are playing co-op, each round score 1 victory point for every 2 players rounded up. So it's just a way to kind of accrue those points without doing anything extra. All right, rules up at the top. Poor manual dexterity. You have no hand of cards. You cannot discard. An effect that would have you draw 1, they gain a victory point instead. So it's the same as before, though they actually do have a hand, but it's not technically a hand, it's the market. So they still use poor manual dexterity, same as all the rest of the factions, even though they do have cards, they're just used in a different way. Hate surprises, still can't play ambush cards against them. Market, row of 5 cards visible to all players. While players can freely look at the cards at all times, the order of the market has to be maintained as new cards are added to the right side. So this is an adjustment from the human faction, because they check this one oftentimes to see if it's craftable. So this one needs to be kind of accessible, and then this is the, I guess, new one. So we'll maybe put it like that. So that's our opening market. It's all set up. Okay, into the actual playing of the Rivetfolk. Birdsong, the first thing you're going to do is discard the leftmost card in the market. So this is just going to go away. In this case, for this game, discarding is going to go over here to the Lost Souls. So now that's going to bring this as the leftmost card, because you're going to, next up, stock the market by adding cards from the deck until there are 5 cards in the market. So let's say that this had been purchased by someone else. Put it over here for now. So this was our leftmost card. That's going to go over here. This becomes our leftmost. We have 3 cards in the market. So we're going to stock and stock. So if you are a player character, well, if you are a player, a human, and since the bots are taking the leftmost card, if it has certain things, you can buy anything, but the bots are only going to be buying this one. So you can kind of see we have 3 craftable things coming up. We have a bird card coming up. Yeah, so there's more, you know, working the system you can do as a human. The bots are really just interested in the thing that their faction needs the cards for, and it's only ever going to come from this one. If you're a human, though, you can see what's coming up and mess around with it. So the last part of Stock the Market is saying the rightmost card becomes the order card for this turn. So that's why this one is revealed. This one is what bots are going to buy. This is your order card over here, because the third thing in Birdsong, craft an order card for 1 victory point if it is an available item, which this one is. Then finally, protectionism. If payment box is empty, which it currently is, increase the investment tracked by bracket level. So this is where the difficulty is going to come in. It's just going to be bumped up one at a time if there are no warriors over here at the beginning of their turn. Which more often than not, there probably will be, because there's almost always going to be something the robot factions are going to say, yes, I would like to do that, please. But, there might come a time when all warriors are on the map, or there just isn't anything they want, or they don't need that. And then if this is empty, then that's going to go up. But for right now, it will go up. It's at 1 now. We'll explain what that means later on. Daylight. You're going to build a trade post in ordered clearing without one. Priority breaking ties. So this being the opening card, as with a lot of the Clockwork and BetterBot factions, it kind of like breaks everything wide open in terms of, you're taking in the entire map. So because the bird card, the only place we can't go is here at the keep. So it's just going to be priority breaking ties, which means we are going to plop a trading post down over there. Just like with the human faction, well, I guess this is a good time to talk about the services. At the start of each other player's Birdsong is when services can be purchased. Human players may purchase 1 service plus 1 guaranteed one, plus 1 per clearing with a trading post and any of their pieces. So if a human was playing the lizards, they would be able to currently purchase 2, because that's the only trading post on the board and they have guys there. If that's there, that's not doing anyone any good because they don't have any pieces there. Makes sense. You have to have people at the trading post to do the trading. Clockwork factions may purchase any number of services with no limit or restrictions of when to buy. So that's when you're going to go to the cards. There are going to be times when the Clockwork factions will be purchasing things as their turns are going on. So it's not just a beginning of the turn thing. Just like the human otters, other factions pay by moving an appropriate number of warriors from their faction supply to the payments box. Again, just like with the human otters, if the vagabond purchases any surfaces, they exhaust the required number of items, and the otters place their own warriors in the payment box. So when to buy cards, because vagabond does not use items to exhaust for riverboats, a human would, but the vagabond does not. But to buy a card, the Rivetfolk put their own warriors over here, because this is an important thing. If there was nothing put here and only an item exhausted, they would not be getting the victory point benefit of selling the product. So this is like a stand-in to represent the vagabond purchasing things. Unlike the human otters, who dictate the price of their services each turn, the cost for the Rivetfolk services is determined by the purchasing player's current score and is the same for all available services. So right here, you see at the beginning of the game, from 0 to 9 victory points, everything costs 2. So actually, to buy a card, it wouldn't just be 1, it would be 2 items, and then 2 warriors would come over here. If from 10 to 19 victory points in the mid game is going to be 3, and 20 or higher at the end of the game is going to be worth 4. So that's actually gives an insight as to how this can slow things down, or rather, just because something's coming up, a faction might want. There will come a time when they just can't do it because they don't have 4 warriors. They might have just 3, but you can't say round up to the nearest full cost. If they don't have enough, they don't get to buy it. Underneath, it explains the 3. Now, I explained when the factions use these, but just an overview for hand cards. Buyer takes a card from the Rivetfolk's market and adds it to their hand. A human could take from anywhere. Bots will only take from here. River boats, or rivet boats, I guess. Buyer treats river paths as regular paths until the end of their turn. Mercenaries, for battle and rule in both daylight and evening, buyer treats Rivetfolk warriors as their own. In battle, they must split hits between their own pieces and Rivetfolk warriors by taking odd hits with their own warriors first. So if, you know, the cats had purchased mercenaries here and they're fighting against the lizards, and, you know, they do 1 and 1, so the lizard's going to die. Well, that's going to become an acolyte, first of all. But they do need to take odd hits with the faction doing the battling. So even though they bought the mercenary here, the hit would go to the cat. Now that would be a very bad time to buy a mercenary. There's no reason why they needed to do that, but just for example today. So we built our trading post in an ordered clearing without a post. Priority breaking ties. So obviously, first priority, that's pretty much going to break all ties. Then you're going to recruit 1 warrior in each ordered clearing where you have 1 or more pieces, or adjacent to a clearing where you have any, and rivers do count as paths for them because the otters can swim. If the ordered card is a bird card, instead you're going to recruit a warrior in each river clearing. If you ever run out of warriors, place them in a clearing priority order until they're gone. So, since it is a bird card, we would take our 5, or, you know, we would put warriors into each of the 5 river clearings because we already had one there, so that works just fine. Now, if we weren't going first and the cats had already taken out this otter, we would still put one here because the rules say you need 1 or more pieces in a clearing or in an adjacent clearing. In this case, because we are otters, they have 2 adjacent clearings where they have pieces. So we would still put an otter here even if the other had already been killed. In this case, we just have double otters in all of the river clearings. Next, you're going to battle in all ordered clearings if you have no warriors in supply. So with the Rivet or Riverfolk, warriors double as money. Just like the rest of Root, things have multiple uses, and if this faction is in play, warriors, which are typically 1 use of just, you know, dominance on the board, become currency. So it's important for the Rivetfolk to keep track of when they run out of their currency down here, which take the form of their warriors. So right now we have 5 warriors in our supply. We would not need to battle. So we would just skip over that and go right to evening. If we didn't have any, then we would battle in all of these clearings because it's a bird card. So we would go down the line and do all of these. Defender ties, you're going to battle the player with the most pieces, then the most victory points. But for today, or for right now, they don't need to battle because they still have a bunch of people. Evening, racketeering. From each clearing, move all but 2 Riverfolk warriors to the payments box. So right now, we only have 2 warriors in any given clearing, but let's say somehow we had built up a couple here. So you are just going to peel off the extras. So at the end of the time, 2 is the ceiling of how many otters you can have in a clearing. And you're going to plop those down in the payments box. Racketeering, you're driving up prices by saying, I don't need any more than that. Boom, now we're going to make some money. Score victory points for each warrior in your payments as well as equal to the investments track. Then return all warriors to their owners. So you can see racketeering, it is an immediate turnaround benefit for you. My neighbor's dog agrees. So in this case, we would score 2 victory points for these 2. And then because protectionism, we bumped up our investments by 1 because there were no warriors here at the beginning. We would score a victory point equal to that. So we're already up at 4 victory points, having done not all that much, to be honest. So that's kind of a little bit surprising how quickly they can make their presence known on the victory points. And finally, at the end of evening, you're going to discard if the order card was crafted in Birdsong, discard it. So this won't always happen, but since we did craft this, we discard, and again, because the lizards are in play, discarding means go to the Lost Souls. I almost restocked it, but you don't do that. There is just one fewer card in the market now. And remember, if the lizards go ahead and buy this for some reason, the next one is just going to shift over. So this is, you know, a rolling market available for purchase. And sometimes the lizards might do a number of those purchases in a row. The only other rule that we have over here on these BetterBot project, and sometimes the Clockwork Expansion faction boards too, there are sometimes rules that are hidden on a different spot of the player board. So always just make sure you do a once over to make sure you're taking it all in. Even though you're reading everything over here, and in the case of the Clockworks, you read through the ROOTbotics, sometimes there will be things you need to take into account that are hidden in a little corner, such as this. Whenever a trade post is removed from the map, reduce the investment track by 1. Return removed trade posts here. So if the lizards say, hey, we're going to buy your stuff, but we don't like you so much, and they destroy that, first of all, they get victory point for doing that. This goes back to the track. They don't, you know, go away from the game, but this does get reduced down to 0. Now, if things made it all the way around and there were still no payments over here, this would go right back up to 1. But my guess would be, more often than not, this is not going to be moving. Obviously, if they start the game, that's a freebie. But besides that, there's almost always going to be something here, I would imagine. And victory points, you know, 1 per warrior that's in here, with these costs, I would imagine that Rivetfolk are going to be a little challenging. They're going to be speedy on the victory point track. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, because there is not some sort of rubber banding like there is with going into turmoil with the Electric Eerie, who start slow, but once they have presence on the board, they're scoring lots of victory points. But if they go into turmoil, they lose some. There is no losing victory points for the Rivetfolk, just moving forward. So just like the other factions, they do have their trait cards, which again, I just printed them out in color. They are on top of some magic cards that I'm not using for anything else, Rod of Ruin. And there are 4 different varieties. Typically these add a little bit of challenge to the faction. They give them an ability they wouldn't otherwise have. But the way I look at this, I've mentioned it earlier in other videos, these are kind of the personalities. You know, if you play with other human characters, you might know your one friend is always like a warmonger and is always going to be battling, whereas another friend might hate going into battles but might be really political and try, oh, I guess that's our choice, might try to get other people to do things for them. So this gives a little bit more personality beyond what's built into the faction board itself. So involved, if a player did not buy your mercenary services on their turn, your warriors belong to all other players for rule and battle purposes, as if the player's opponent bought the mercenary service. Oh my goodness. That's... So, wow, that's going to be... You know what? I'm already running 4 bots at the same time. Let's do another one. Ferocious. Okay. Ferocious. As attacker, you always have a maximum rolled hits of 3. So typically you need 3 people to actually do 3 hits. But because they're so ferocious, I mean, look at that otter. And I mean, look at this meeple. Clearly ferocious. In here, if there was another cat, you know, those 3 were in there, they could roll a 3 as the attacking side and take them all out. So, okay, that's a little bit more my speed. There's going to be a lot that I'm going to have to kind of balance in my head. So I don't need anything quite as involved as the involved trait. But there are, you know, 3 other ones that are available to make things interesting. we'll go through figuring out the traits for the other bots in the playthrough. But aside from that, that is the rundown on the Rivetfolk. And next time we will see if they are quite as oppressive on the victory point track as I kind of imagine they're going to be. Who knows? I could be totally wrong, but like the note said, this is the new version that should play much better. However, it's not balanced yet or extensively play tested. So let's play test it together. So with that, see you next time at the Game Garage. Thanks for stopping by.